we are here to change our entire society because our society makes it so that these evil people are able to rise to power. But how are we going to change our society? By implementing the exact same system and structures that we have, just with someone new. Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we'll be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing The King of Scars Duology by Leigh Bardugo. Make sure you check out our Patreon for exclusive content, and we just started a newsletter. If you would like to sign up, the link for that will be below in the description or wherever if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. But our Patreon is at Literary Liberation for exclusive content. For more content outside of the podcast, please check out our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host Kristen, and you can find me at KRXXEXN on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host Mariah, and you can find me at HungryRye on all social media platforms.
Let's get into it.
Yo, let's get into it.
Okay, so
Throwback.
We won't be, again, we mentioned in the Six of Crows episode, and then also, I guess we didn't mention in Shadow and Bone, but we've already talked about Leigh Bardugo and Leigh Bardugo's controversies, quote unquote, within the first episode of the Grishaverse episode that we did, because we split each series into its own episode. So if you want our discussion and takes on that, you can hear that in the Shadow and Bone episode. So we won't really be discussing Leigh Bardugo in that type of way, really.
We might revisit it for like the Familiar in a couple months, so
yeah, we could probably redo it for Familiar. But if you to listen to the podcast, I recommend you listen to the Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows episodes as well, because we do discuss a lot of things within the series and a lot of the arcs that the characters experience within this series. You do need to read those other series prior to this as well to get the full scope of the characterization and everything. So if you haven't listened to those, check those out as well. Do you want to try the summary? Just I guess if somebody hasn't read this series but have read the other two prior series.
Yeah, so if you just read Six of Crows, or if you just read Shadow and Bone, this story follows the Rabkin king Nikolai and his, I cannot pronounce his troop name, which consists of Kenya.
Something like that.
I
don't know.
How I spelled it on there. It follows his group, like
Boila,
his team.
Tamar.
Yes, exactly.
Basically anybody that was in Shadow and Bone. Yeah.
And it's his journey to rid himself of like the curse that the Darkling had imbued upon him in the second or third book.
The third book. The third.
It was the third book. So it's just that continuation, and then it's also a continuation of Nina's character development and story, and how it all ties back in.
The results of Crooked Kingdom. No spoilers for Crooked Kingdom yet. So you definitely need to read those.
Read both of the series, because we had mentioned in Six of Crows how you could just read Six of Crows kind of just how it is because of how it is written. This is not a duology that you're going to be able to just like jump into. I wish you could, because it is great, but you at least have to read.
You have to read both.
I mean, I think you have to read both.
You do have to read both.
You have to read Shadow and Bone. But just read Six of Crows. Just do it by the bullet.
Six of Crows is amazing. I feel like if you really love Six of Crows, then you should read Shadow and Bone, and then you can read the King of Scars duology, because I feel like the Shadow and Bone trilogy is okay. I rate it very high. If you listen to the previous episodes, you know, like I do really love this series, and I do recommend it if that's like you're interested in the magic system, if you like the characters and stuff like that. If you like Six of Crows, I think you will like Shadow and Bone, but you may not love it. But you would love this if you love Six of Crows, because it's a lot more similar. I mean, and that's one thing that we do discuss in like the first episode, talking about like the Grishaverse and stuff like that. Like Shadow and Bone trilogy is Leigh Bardugo's debut novels. You can tell by this she has a couple novels underneath her belt, so she's really gotten into her own style of writing and has her own personality of writing. That is not, I think, shown in Shadow and Bone trilogy.
You can definitely tell by the time you get to Rule of Wolves just how developed her writing has become, and I think that's part of why this duology is so great. And I really wish she could rewrite the original trilogy to be in this like style.
Yeah.
Because it would have been impeccable.
I think it would be like 5 stars
be able to,
across
like,
the
do it,
board.
but-
Yeah, it would be like completely 5 stars across like every single book. Because like from me, like Six of Crows on, I rate everything 5 stars. Six of Crows 5 stars. Crooked Kingdom 5 stars. Rule of Wolves 5 stars. King of Scars 5 stars. Like these books, and like I love the Shadow and Bone series. I think I rated them all like 4.5 or higher or so. So they're still like really highly rated. But I wish I could give these like 6 stars because I feel like they're just that much of a higher step above Shadow and Bone. But Shadow and Bone is still fun. It's fun, but it's definitely, you can tell the quality is not there.
And I also think that's why both like the King of Scars and Rule of Wolves, when I was looking up their ratings on Goodreads, they don't have a lot of reviews. I think people got off on the wrong foot with Shadow and Bone, and they were like, why would I read this duology? Because there was less than 200,000 reviews for King of Scars, and then less than 150,000 reviews for Rule of Wolves. And Leigh Bardugo is a very big author.
Mm-hmm. These
In
are
the
less
fantasy
popular than
space,
Ninth
though.
House, which is like her new series that's coming out. Like at least the first book in the Ninth House series. Usually that's how it is though. Like the first book in a series usually is more popular than like the later ones. But Ninth House is more popular than the King of Scars duology, which I haven't read Ninth House, so I really can't have an opinion on it. But from what I've heard from other people that also like Leigh Bardugo, they like the Grishaverse more than they like the Ninth House series. Because Ninth House, I think, is like
Really?
urban fantasy.
Oh.
I don't know if it's urban fantasy, but it's definitely like set in like the real world, but with magic, I think. So.
I have a hard time with urban fantasy.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know. I mean, it's Leigh Bardugo, so I trust her. But I mean, if anything, I feel like maybe Ninth House is high 4 stars in it. But I've heard nothing but good things about The Familiar, and I actually won an arc for it, so I will be reading that here soon, probably. So I'm very
Kristen,
excited for that.
reading it first.
Yes. I'll be flexing on Mariah. I'll be like, oh my god, this is so good. Wish you could read it.
But I think this is going to be our cutoff point, because I don't think we can talk about anything else without it being
without
in the spoiler
spoiling
zone. So
anything that happens
if you
within
were
Six of
wondering
Crows.
whether or not you ought to be reading these, just do it.
I
Like,
would
if you
say
enjoy
yes,
it, like,
yeah.
I think it's well worth it.
I think this is a great duology. If you like Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, I think this series is very much worth like struggling, quote unquote, through Shadow and Bone trilogy to get to this point, because the way you get such a good payoff, I think, from the characters that you get to deal with. Like, because most of the characters that are in this are in Shadow and Bone mainly, and then there's only one character from Crooked Kingdom that really is followed mostly. Because it's mostly we go from focusing on Ketterdam with Six of Crows back to Ravka with Shadow and Bone mostly focused on as a country.
Whereas this book, you get a lot more of, like, Fierda and Shuhan.
Yes.
And also Ravka.
Yes.
Like, the turmoil
You
of being
get
that
that
country
like
in the middle.
part of the land, because it's like I don't know, they're all like together, versus Ketterdam being like island only. But I mean, you get a lot of Fierda in the first Six of Crows too, because they have to go to the ice court. Basically, if you haven't read any of the other series, I know this is really early on, we kind of go a little bit further into it, but a lot of these, you can't talk about any of these books without spoiling them, especially spoiling the earlier series. So I'd say if you read Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, because those are the most popular ones, you would like these, and it's worth reading Shadow and Bone. You get the way that these characters get to live. And if you like Six of Crows, you more than likely like Nina's story and what happened with Nina's characterizations throughout the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. And this builds upon her so much, and it's really good for if you like Nina. If you care about any of the crows, Nina is a big character within the series.
I also think if you were somebody that kind of wanted more like politics, whether that just be like a class, like a very light class analysis, and also just a rather diverse casting of characters, like, you're gonna get that in this. And I really appreciated that for this one. It makes me almost like them more than the Six of Crows duology. I don't know if I like them more or not.
Well, because I mean, even comparing like Six of Crows, I do think like Six of Crows is really diverse, and I mean, I think Leigh Bardugo has like some of the most diverse fantasy that at least I personally read, like within like
a
BOOK-TOK.
mainstream white author, you don't see this.
Yeah. And I do, so I feel like that's something that we can really appreciate. But I do think, I guess I don't know. I don't know if they can be like compared on like diversity levels, you know. Like I think Leigh Bardugo does really well at writing diverse characters. Or
I think Leigh
it's
Bardugo, this is just like a Leigh Bardugo simp episode, um, compared to somebody like Sarah J. Maas,
mm-hmm,
who is also very popular, or Rebecca Yarros. I don't know enough about Fourth Wing, but it does seem.
whitewashed.
I've read the first 16 pages of Fourth Wing. I do not like how she writes. It is very goofy. Like, this feels a lot more mature. Like, you can definitely tell, like, it goes from like a YA to almost like an NA
Mm-hmm.
type audience. Like, it
Yes.
grows with the
Yes.
readers, which I imagine is what she intended for the people that were reading it as they were coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that.
Well,
Because it
because
gave me very, like, Tolkien-esque. Because
yeah.
Tolkien also did that with his books. So.
Well, because I think like basically within this series, I think it's Six of Crows takes place 2 years after the last Shadow and Bone, and then this takes place the first King of Stars takes place roughly a year or so after Crooked Kingdom. So basically everybody is now like Nikolai was always older, I think, like he was always a couple years older than Alina, so he's probably like early mid-20s, and then Zoya is probably early
I think
20s
they're
or
all in their 20s.
yeah. And then I think Nina will probably be the youngest at 18, 19. I think she is at this point. She was like 17 in Crooked Kingdom. So I think she's 18 in this. So she's like the only young one, which makes sense because was supposed to be like in school and stuff when the events of Shadow and Bone took place. Everyone's older now, so it's actually nice to read about like not children making decisions. I mean, they're still very young, especially in ways that require like ruling a country and things like that, but you can feel like they make very adult decisions and it's not like goofy. I think you will like this duology if you're a Nikolai simp like I am. I love him so much, and I bet Kaz would be named after Nikolai if Tyler had read like Shadow and Bone Scars and had not been reading Six of Crows. I told Tyler he has until the end of March to finish Six of Crows, or I'm spoiling Crooked Kingdom for him.
That's brutal.
I'm tired of not being able to talk
Honestly,
about it.
in like 6 months.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I said. Because I feel like there's so much that happens like at the end of Crooked Kingdom. Well, because he's like, I'm not going to read Crooked Kingdom. What?
Okay.
So I was like, Six of Crows literally ends on a cliffhanger. What do you mean you're not reading Crooked Kingdom? I guess this is official spoilers. You didn't really say anything. Well, what did you think, I guess, about this year? This is your first time reading it. I had already read it. This is my read.
Yeah, I was very surprised by it, which I feel like I read so much shit that like you have to work kind of hard as an author to impress me as like a reader. Like I don't feel like I'm a very passive reader, so I have a lot of things that need to be what is it? My ducks need to be in a row in order to like have like the unveiling and like the plot twists, but they have to be timed right. The pacing of the books need to be good. The character development needs to be like realistic and also impactful for me to like want to care about these characters. And I think Leigh Bardugo did a really good job. Like I personally did not like Zoya throughout the entire Shadow and Bone.
Yeah, I think that was
trilogy, and
intentional. I think
she redeemed that very eloquently. It all makes sense.
Yeah.
Like why she is the way she is. She's so stern, like so cold and cross, and I don't know. It all makes sense. I love her now.
Yeah, I told you she would too. I was like, I know. Like, Zoya is one of my favorite characters, and I remember I didn't like her either whenever I first read the Shadow and Bone series. Then by the time I first read this, oh, I love her. And then I remember, I think you saw a spoiler like forever ago about Zoya and Nikolai getting together, and you're like, what the fuck? Why are they in game? And I'm like, you don't even understand why they're in game. Like, there's so much. Because, like, even like the fact that they're in game, these bitches don't even fucking touch each other until like the last 200 pages of this second book in the duology. So, like, there's so much growth that their relationship goes through and stuff like that. And I feel like you maybe, whenever you got that first like thing, you're like, oh, like he just like flips right to Zoya, when the answer is like they both do so much growth separately that they're able to grow together, and it's Jeff's kiss on like a slow burn romance.
Well, even in the end, it's not like your typical romance where it's like boy gets girl or like damsel in distress. They're both very independent. They have like their own like mindsets, and they are treated very respectfully as characters, which sounds so weird. I know they're not real, but I really hate when authors will just, I don't know, they take like almost a misogynistic route with their like female main character, and they're just like, well,
Where
I'm
it's
just
like
gonna like
her
pregnancy
only,
trope,
yeah.
marriage trope.
Zoya
I
is a
don't
strong,
know.
independent woman that doesn't need no man, but she got a man because she wanted him. You know, she
But
didn't.
even then, like they're not married by the end
No,
of it. Like
they're not married at all. They're just
it's
like,
just
okay, we'll see how this
they're
goes, sort of.
dating.
Yeah, which is so. I think Zoya is braver than I am because I would have folded the first second that man said hello to me. I'd be like, hello, hi, you know, and like she goes through like this whole like emotional like turmoil where she's like, this isn't what's right for the country. Nikolai needs to marry someone else to build like a solidified because like that's one of the main overarching, because Nikolai is king now after he exiled his father and his mother, so he's in charge of the country, where because there's so much war between Firda and the Shuhan, and Ravka being right in the middle of that, he's like, I have to marry someone for an alliance. He's like, I can marry like the one of the famous like merchants from Ketterdam's daughter to like get forgiveness on my loans, or I can marry someone from Firda, and basically like then I would be forced to have an alliance with Firda, or marry someone from the Shuhan and have like an alliance from there. And there's so much like political relations and stuff that Nikolai doesn't even want to go through with, because he's like, I actually like wants to be a person and marry for love, and he's like, that can't happen, so like he has to do what's best for his country, which is basically like his child. He tries to do what's best for it, and you get that a lot within his monologue where he's like, I try so hard and nothing like turns out right, because it's got to be hard being in the middle of two warring countries that basically want your land.
And I think also with Nikolai's character, he actually like served on the ground with other proletariat. Like
Mm-hmm.
he grew up with them, like
Yeah,
his tutor, or like
his
the boy
friend
who was brought in
Dominic.
to like make him behave, like it like humbled him.
Yeah, he
But also
realized.
like Nikolai touched grass, which is
Yeah,
something that his brother didn't do.
yeah,
That was a very grounding. It's very nice. It's hard reading a lot of I like modern
fantasy,
books that are about like fantasy medieval
bourgeois.
times, where it's like, oh, the kingdom is saved, so now
We're
we're
just
all good.
staying
But this
under the
like
king.
actually
Yeah.
talked about like, oh well, maybe like it's not like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the only like the prominent example that will like forever live in my fucking brain is like the Throne of Glass series, and I hate talking about it, but I hated how that whole series was predicated on this idea of like Selena Saradothian has to return to the crown, the boy who lived,
Yeah.
like, you know. I was like,
Got to
the vibe
become a
dropped the
wizard
whole thing.
cop to like we are here to change our entire society, because our society makes it so that these evil people are able to rise to power. But how are we going to change our society? By implementing the exact same system and structures that we have, just with someone new. And I don't think that like with the King of Scars duology that they do like anything that's so out of the ordinary, but it is different because you get Zoya, who is like a working class woman. I mean, of course, because like she eventually got to go to the Little Palace and stuff like that. But you learn that she's half Suli. Her father was completely Suli, which is like the Romani people are like representative of them within this series. And then also because like the type of like experience that Grisha people face within like Ravka, and then like you learn all about like them getting tested on in the Shuhan, and then in Fira they kill them just on sight basically and stone them and stuff like that. So then actually like seeing someone who is not of the like higher class or like of like your white male getting into power, and she like there's like one line that she specifically says that like whenever they're in Ketterdam, her and Nikolai, and she's like, this place sucks because it's only like the rich people that are profiting. Like in Ravka, I want everyone to have a chance, not just the landowners and the noblemen. She's like, I want everyone to be profitable in Ravka, you know?
And like Kristen, I can't speak for everyone, but when I want to practice escapism
Mm-hmm.
during these dark times, um, I don't want to read a story where it's like so intentionally apolitical and divorced from reality that it starts to become nonsensical. Like we very much are principled in our understanding of Marxism and how our class-based society it like truly affects everybody in it. So when we're reading fantasy work, it does not work for our brains when those factors are not taken into consideration.
Well, it's just one thing where you're gonna sit here and build this entirely new world and then act like there's no political specter within your society, or it's like everything, like, unless you're going to be like following only the proletariat or something like that, there's no way that you can't have, because I feel like if there's like regular people within your fantasy, then like you can maybe avoid quote unquote the politics in ways, because if they're not overthrowing the government or trying to like do something like that. But I mean, most of the time they are doing something like that. I guess maybe Tolkien might be an example of it, because he's like, they're more like traveling to get like the ring or whatever.
Yeah, but like the hobbits, right? Like they're all like working
Oppressed.
class.
Yeah.
Like they're all of like the same class. Like they don't really have a super like hierarchical society that like Toppington like is. So like they're just like normal folk that practice like agro like communalism, and they just like share their resource for the most part. Like there is like some bankers and like a mayor, but
Yeah.
it's nothing. I don't know. Like what else have we read? Let me look at my fucking shelf.
Well, because like Masters of
I
Death,
don't
I
know.
feel
Like
like could be an example of where it doesn't need to be super political, but it was a little bit, because like it would throw in like kind of more casually and stuff like that. I think that Masters of Death, because they weren't overthrowing like the United States government or anything like that. They were like working against like death and like whoever that one monster guy was to do like their game or whatever. And like there was still like some political messaging, but I think it ended up being more of a social commentary rather than a political commentary on things. And I think that's where
so
like
we
the
have like
line.
a spectrum.
Yeah.
From like I don't know, like
Babble.
to like what is like the most intentional like apolitical book that we've ever read.
I don't know. I feel like at least nowadays they've kind of gotten better about it. Where I guess like Percy Jackson isn't political personally that I've read, but I feel like there's ways
Maybe like Hunger like
the Hunger Games
almost
is
Hunger Games.
completely political. What do you mean?
I don't like the anti-communist elements of
Yeah.
it.
They be hating on
That makes
District
me mad.
13 too much. District 13 had it going on. But like I don't know. I feel like I think also with like our perspectives and stuff, like everything kind of ends up I guess maybe like a romance book. I'm sure there's some like romance read that are like where it's always just like, oh, like these people don't have to work, they just have money. You know, like where it's just like that like resolves that conflict that they could have. Because that's kind of like, I've been reading Butchers and Blackbird, and that's kind of how that is, where it's just like, oh, like, we have jobs. Like, this guy owns a restaurant, but it's not, like, the center focus. So it's, like, background information.
Dare I say, like Haunting Adeline, where it's like there is like an element of like an understanding oppression, but then like completely ignoring it and like continuing on with the plot line. So maybe like something of that nature. Maybe not necessarily that one. And then Babel, and I think that like King of Scars, it's like right here,
where
like the whole Grishaverse.
it actually acknowledged
Guitar's like over here.
Where because like that's the thing where like it actually like acknowledges that like, hey, like this is a kingdom, we have political structures and stuff like that, and you can't have like a fantasy. Like I feel like inherently fantasy, if you're like working where you're like overthrowing the government or like overthrowing the oppressed nature or like joining the kingdom where like you become like a princess or you become a queen because of who you marry and stuff like that. Those are all political no matter which way you want to look at it, you know? Like whether or not you want.
I don't want to sound like the lady on TikTok that was like, well, your fantasy is not believable because your mountain ranges in your maps are not believable, but like this is like the relative like world building
information.
What do we want to say? Like information and just aspects to your world building that I don't know. I just wish more people take into consideration. I know a lot of people like to go into books and like head empty, no think, but when you're doing
fantasy's
high fantasy,
maybe not for you.
I don't think you can divorce it from that.
Especially if you want it to be like some type of commentary on something, where especially like the Grishaverse goes specifically into like oppression of the Grisha and how they're like treated in other countries and stuff like that. Where even in Ravka, they don't have equal rights and things like that. Because there's like one scene where Zoya talks about how like, oh, if we go to this place, they might not let me in because I'm Grisha. And then Nikolai's like, oh, but that, or like about the Suli people. And they're like, oh, they're supposed to like let them in. And he's like, and then Zoya's like, well, who enforces the laws? And it's white people and stuff like that enforce those laws. And so, and that's something that Nikolai doesn't even realize because he's been on that privileged pedestal his whole life. And I think that's why it's so important to have, like, characters like Zoya and stuff like that are like, no, look, this is not, like, you want to do all these great things, and that's great, and you're, like, doing a great first step, but it's never gonna, like, finish unless we, like, kick it in the butt, you know? That's...
And I think that's what makes Nikolai such a good character, because despite being, like, a white cis male, he ends up using the privilege that he has to step down and put somebody else in power that understands those systems of oppression that he knows that he just will never be able to get, or make his country that he does love. He loves all the people in his country.
And he knows
he won't be able to rule them and lead them in the direction that they need to go in.
To have, like, the most fair and actually, like, someone who understands, like, the thing, I mean, being Sully, being Grisha, being a woman, like, because even, like, Firda, which Nina experiences a lot, where they are very much, like, patriarchal society, women just sit, eat pretty, cook dinner sort of society and stuff like that, and Nina critiques it a lot, where she's like, even in Ravka, she, like, acknowledges that it's not perfect, but she's like, at least I have the choice to do some of these things where I can choose to fight in war if I want to. Where in Firda, you don't even get that option as a woman and things.
No,
like
you can very much tell that, like, Firda is modeled after, like, puritanical, like,
religious
Christian society. Like, that's very, like, where they take, like, gods and rename them
Gil, or whatever his name is,
to, like, be better for them, because they're like, well, it's not actually like that pagan god. It's our
it's our own god. But then it's funny too, because, like, one thing that, like, Nina discusses and things like that, where it's like a lot of like things and stuff where, like, the ice court looks like it was built with, like, Grisha powers and things like that, like a Grisha fabricator built it, where it's like, no, he wasn't Grisha, he was a saint to these people. Aww.
Don't you wish Kaz did that?
Yeah, he's evil. He'd bite me if I tried to do that.
He just needed a little love. I had to hold him and rock him like
baby.
He's just a baby, huh? I'm sorry. So, okay. There we go.
All better.
Intermission ended. We just needed a little love.
I mean, we haven't even talked about, like, Nina and, like, because of what happens at the end of Crooked Kingdom. R.I.P. Mariah. Boy right there.
And Nina went through the ringer. And I think that's what made me like her a little bit more. She was a shithead. She was so... I know she was young. I know she was young. She drove me fucking crazy through, like, Six of Crows. And then I started liking her, like, halfway through Crooked Kingdom. And then King of Scars came around. I was like, okay, I can fuck with her. And then by the end of Rule of Wolves, I was like,
she's just like me for real.
He just, like, can't catch a fucking break.
It's so sad. Like, I love Nina, and I think one thing too is that, like, they constantly reference how Nina is a bigger woman too, where she's plus size, where they're like, oh, you don't skip any meals, do you? And she goes, I try not to, you know. And then, like, about how, like, she always eats all of her dessert and things like that, where, like, even though she's, like, tailored in this series to look different, where she still obviously has her weight and stuff like that. And there's, like, so many pieces of fan art that I see where they draw, like, Nina as, like, this skinny mini. Did we read about the same character?
Like, sure. And, like, maybe the beginning of Six of
Not
Crows,
even. She's
then, like, they emphasize, like, how much she loves her treats, her waffles.
Yeah, like her curves are very much. Yeah, like her curves are, like, full front. She's got a donk. Like, she thick in every which way. We love that for her. But I think that's something that, like, even in fantasy, they're always like, oh, they were starving, and so they were so skinny, you know? And they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
lithe and sleek and...
Well, because, like, if...
I'm tired.
That's one thing, too, where it's, like, where in fantasy, if you're going to have it mirror, like, medieval Europe and stuff like that, where it's, like, your nobles are supposed to be plus size. Because, like, that's how they were flexing on people, that they could actually eat their food, unlike the poor people who were skinny. So being skinny was seen as ugly, while being plumper was seen as a positive, because it shows that you could actually eat, like, all your meals a day and more, you know? And I think that's something that, like, I know, like, J.K. Rowling does it in, like, Harry Potter, where it's, like, being fat is, like, a negative thing, where it's always, like, the bad people are always fat, and, like, they're described as fat and stuff like that. So it's always really refreshing like this, where it's like, no, Nina's just a bigger girl, and that's just how it is, you know?
Yes, and it's so nice that she meets Hannah.
We don't know how to say her name,
because we know that Nina is queer.
Yes,
that's made
it's
very
mentioned
apparent in, like, Six Crows Duology.
Yeah, where she's like, she talks about, like, some, like, other girls or something with Matthias, and he's like, you're disgusting. Because, like, of course in Firda, like, being gay is more than likely frowned upon. They don't really talk about it, but, like, it's definitely not, like, okay with how, like, you're supposed to be like, the man is supposed to provide for his family and things like that, with the very much patriarchal society. So obviously, like, being queer in Firda is not allowed. And
That's
Pan's
what makes like
story,
Hans. Oh, her
it's
character is
so,
so good.
from being from Firda and then being queer and then also being like a strong woman, like within the beginning of,
But who also becomes like gender nonconforming.
yes. And I think that is so great that Leigh Bardugo does that, because like she introduces in Shadow and Bone like the ability where you can like change your appearance or whatever to whatever she wants. And Han's able to do that and become like a trans icon and feel better as identifying as a man at the end of the series is so refreshing to see, because all the time in fantasy is just heteronormative.
Either that or it feels like tokenizing, where they're like, it's like an afterthought where they're like, oh, I really need to make this apparent so like people know that I'm an ally.
But even in
You know?
King of Scars, I noticed this on my reread and stuff like that. Like in King of Scars, you can tell that Han is like identifies more with like male things, because like not only because like they're a tomboy and stuff like that, but then they're also like, they talk about like whenever they first cut their hair and then like they start crying because they're like, I look so beautiful like this, because they've always had long hair for their entire life because they grew up as a girl and as supposed to be like a pretty girl and things like that. And you can see like the guilt that Han feels, because like she loves her, or they love their father, but then their father like raised them to be more tomboyish, and then they were like, if I wasn't like this, then my family would be happier. And that. And then even just like being with Nina and them dating and becoming more than friends.
It's just lovely.
Yeah, they have such a beautiful story, I think, together. And Leigh Bardugo is so dirty for whatever you think she died.
You know, I was texting Kristen literally this morning, and I was like, I'm gonna put it down. I'm gonna stop reading.
I know. Could you imagine if that happened to Nina twice?
Double homicide. Like,
no, literally.
Oh,
and like poor
God,
Nina, she's like, is this what my love does? I was like, ah.
She's just such a sweet angel, and
I
just
know.
wanted her to have a happy ending. I was like, God damn it.
We didn't talk about the series that is the biggest heartbreak of my life.
It hurted.
It's
so
sad. R.I.P. autism representative David Kotstoyesk, or however you say his name, on his wedding night.
Love
too. His wedding night.
Gosh.
His
like,
wedding.
I don't know what it is. Obviously, like, I compare a lot of stuff back to like Sarah J. Maas's books because we've read so many of them.
Yeah.
But when she had deaths happen in her book, it was not impactful in the slightest. But
And they always felt
Dugo
like...
did such a good job of writing these characters and making you love them and just feel comfortable with them. And then she's just like, no,
see ya.
but take it away.
But because even like
And
one
it's
thing,
awful, but it's good. It's good. Awful. It's
Yeah.
necessary. Awful.
whereas like you actually feel like none of these characters are safe. Like, okay, anybody could go at any moment.
Like the stakes are actually high.
Well, because even with like Han, like that's why like you thought she was dead for real, because Leigh Bardugo never does like the bringing back of a character. But I think
never.
the way that she
Really
did it was
like,
so genius. Because you're like, oh my god, you're like, I can't
She's
believe
a sneaky bitch.
Yeah, like you would have never thought of that. Like, and that's one thing that I too love, like about like you don't even realize that like the trans like opportunity for like having tailors where people can just like change their facial structure to be actually what they want it to be, if they want to be more masculine or more feminine or whatever it is. And I think that's so good to put that within one of your main characters. It's really nice to see. And like even there's so much like just regular, like not even including just like Nina and Han being like queer representation, but you also have even side characters are like queer too. Like there's multiple queer side characters that I feel like
Toya and
Tamar is queer.
Nadia. Tamar.
Yeah.
Tamar and Nadia.
Nadia are together.
The twins confused.
But then also there's Mayu's brother, whatever his name was.
You can tell
he and
he's
him
queer code with Brian.
Yes. Them two, I always got that vibe where they're kissing on the sidelines. I know they are. And so like I feel like while like other like fantasy novels and things like that, like even like Babel, like it's sort of like reference that like Robin and Rami are queer coded, but it's so like slight.
Spoiler.
Oh, sorry if you haven't read Babel. Oops. But I'm assuming most people probably have if you're listening to this podcast. But like even they don't like go into it, but then like other like series where it's just like one queer character. Like you get one queer character. You never get multiple. And then this has like two main characters are queer and then also side characters. Multiple side characters are queer. It's very refreshing to see within your fantasy.
I want more of it. I need more
Because,
of it.
I mean, not even mentioning, like, Wyland and Jesper, who get a little bit of a cameo in Rule of Wolves. I don't even know. Like, I love this duology so much. Like, I swear, like after the battle scene, whenever, like, Zoya turns into the dragon, it's, like, waterworks for me. I was just sitting there, like, constant tears flowing. Like, just because I love, like, because, like, that's wherever you get the final arc with, like, her and Nikolai and her becoming queen, and then even with, like, Nina finally getting her happy ending after like losing Matthias. I mean, anytime Nina brings up Matthias, I'm crying. It makes me so fucking sad. Like it's so sad because like there's like one scene where she's like arguing with Han or whatever, and like Han like knows that like she was obviously kind of lying about like being a fisherman's wife or whatever. But like it's like she's not for sure, and she's like, your husband didn't like you like this, did he? And she's like, no, he didn't, because like obviously her and Matthias were never married, but like she was like, no, we argued all the time and he said I was rude, but we still loved each other and stuff like that. And it's still really like, it's just like it hits you right in the heart if you're like, ugh, thinking about like the love that she had and that she lost, because this is still like in King of Scars whenever they were like fighting about
Well,
it.
it's like the love that she lost. It was a lot of it was like the potential. Like they lost out on so much time
They were
that they
so
could have
young.
had to build something so beautiful, and
Mm-hmm.
it just couldn't come to fruition.
I mean,
And
because
you see a lot of that in her grieving process.
well, because like Nina and Matthias are true enemies to lovers. Like they're actual, like coming from Ravka, coming from Firda, warring countries where Matthias is constantly throughout like the Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom, constantly unlearning the wrong things that he was taught in Firda, and that's one thing that like so much where he's just like, I need you, like you were able to make me unlearn all of these horrible prejudice and things like that. Like Nina, you have to do like his dying wish is like, you have to do this for my other people, like my family, you know. And then what with like Joran, I love Joran, even though like he killed Matthias. Like his whole thing, it's so
That I did not
heartbreaking.
see that coming.
Really?
That took me by surprise. I don't know why. It just didn't until he said it. I was like, oh, it's him.
Yeah. And then it's just so sad because like Matthias, well, because like even just reading like the scene where Matthias just died, where it's like where he's like, he knew he was just like him, where he was young and scared and stuff like that, but then he was still surprised whenever he heard the gun go off. And it's like Joran killed his brother in cold blood, and he feels so much regret for that, because he's like, he feels bad for killing him, because he's like, I shouldn't have done that. And that he is unlearning like Firda and Jarl Brum's like entirety of like philosophy that he's shoving down these young boys' throat. And it's really crazy to see, because like I think Firda is like a great representation of like America in many ways, because like you have like this warmongering country or like leadership and stuff like that, and the people that are out there actually fighting, they don't want to be there doing that, you know. Like that's why whenever like Zoya comes flying in on the dragon, all the other people are like, Sancta Zoya, like all of the Druskella and the Firdan soldiers are like dropping their weapons. They're like, oh fuck, like this is like, we're going against God right now, sort of thing, where they realize like we don't even actually want to be like fighting this. And then you see like with like United, or not the United States, but I feel like Firda represents the United States so much, because like they start bombing like their own people during like the big scrimmage that they have, where that's like, you see like whenever the United States was like during like the Cold War and stuff like that, talking about ways to like make Cuba and communism seem worse, they were gonna bomb American people, and they have bombed like American people and killed American citizens. Be like, look at what communism's done, you know? Whenever it's actually been these like fear mongering higher ups, which is exactly what like Jarl Brum represents. And even like Prince Rasmus, whatever his name is.
Rasmus? Rasmus.
Yeah, whatever his name is. His bitch ass. I hate that guy. He got what he deserved. And it's like, whenever she killed his ass. Like, the way that he treated, like, Doran and even, like, Nina and Hane. Like, he was a terrible person. And the fact that they were like, oh, I don't know what you thought whenever you were reading about him. Like, if you thought he could actually, like, come to the light.
He was just doing too many, like, sus things. Like, his whole, like, mannerisms and his behaviors, like, it was very unsettling. And, like, the way his mom was and how she killed the Grisha that helped her, like, stay healthy and, like, give birth to him, like,
Yeah.
that's fucked up.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, fuck them.
Yeah, no. But that's why, like, it's so cool seeing, like, Han basically take this idea. And so, like, because of, like, Han and Nina being in power and stuff like that, I don't know how they're gonna have kids or, like, what they're gonna do about that. Get, like, a sperm donor or something for Miss Hila
They'll
Anderson.
probably end up, like, adopting a baby because she could, like, tailor Nina to look like she's pregnant, right? And then just, like,
I don't
take in,
know.
like, an orphan baby.
I don't know
I mean,
how
if they
they
can
do
change
that,
the
but
size of their bodies and,
yeah.
like, most vocal cords, why couldn't
But
she just make, like, her uterus look bigger?
I wonder, they might need Genya for that because I don't know how strong of a tailor Kane is. Like, she's pretty good tailor, but she also has no training, you know? While Genya, for her blood, sweat, and tears, I feel so bad for Genya. Whenever she, like, the funeral for David, shit's fucked. So fucked.
This was, like, the only, like, duology that, like, really made me feel anything since Babel.
Yeah. Well, because, like, the scene whenever Nina is burying Matthias, that scene gets me. Makes me so sad.
That was brutal. That hurt. The whole thing fucking hurt.
Yeah. Where, like,
We
there's
didn't even talk about Darkling coming back.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah, at
doing,
the
like,
end
a
of
proper
King of
analysis
Scars.
Darkling.
Yeah. I mean, because he's such, like, a side project. Well, because, like, at the end of King of Scars, and it's like, oh, you got, like, hey, guys. And then you're just like, what the fuck? Because, like, Mariah, the whole time she's reading it, she's like, so when's the Darkling come back? I'm like, what are you talking about? The Darkling doesn't come back. He's dead. But he was not dead.
I knew he would come back. I just think he's definitely misguided. Like, he was, like, by any means it was necessary to achieve, like, a liberation and power for his people. And I can, like, kind of imagine, like, him living so long and seeing, like, his people be, like, killed and hunted. Like, he talked about it, like, towards the wolves, whereas, like, they would be in hiding. They couldn't, like, exist in, like, normal, like, public spaces without being, like, at risk. So he internalized all of that, and, like, sure, it was very, very, very extreme, and it did not work out in the end.
Yeah. I think
But
a lot
even
of
Nikolai was like, he was kind of onto
well,
something with
that's one
something,
thing.
even though it didn't.
Yeah.
It
And that's
didn't
one
go
thing
right.
that's, like, with even, like, with Yuri and, like, his characterization and stuff like that, because he ends up being in, like, the Darkling's head, and he realizes that, like, the Darkling is too extreme by taking innocent lives more than once, and that's a lot of the reason why, like, putting Genya up, because he wanted to keep his power so much, and him, like, giving Genya as, like, a gift to, like, the queen and the king, and letting her get raped by the king and stuff like that, and not doing anything about it. And that's, like, one thing where he was too of himself, I think, to do the right thing for all of Ravka, because I think what he would only end up doing the right thing for is the Grisha, and not for the Grisha and Ravkan, you know? And I think that's why I think Zoya will, like, inevitably do the right thing for the regular people and the Grisha, all of Ravka, inevitably.
I sure hope. I think there will be a spinoff.
I hope so. She said that
left it open enough.
She left it open enough.
Like, there could be something.
Because there's this quote where it says, I do want prosperity for Ravka, said Zoya, but for all of Ravka, not just the nobles and their palaces or the merchants and their fleet of ships. She wants it for everyone. That's Comrade Zoya right there. She said, we're distributing the wealth. I mean, with the overarching, like, Marxist view of this, obviously this does not go, like, as extreme as Babel does for us, but I do think it is a great start, and I do think I could see in the future, because even Nikolai discusses, like, Ravka will not always need a king or queen, like, he won't always need a monarchy, but with the way that, like, the war is and the way that, like, their current countries are, and I think it's kind of like reminiscent where it's like there would never be a communist like United States until like the global South is communist, because there's no way for that to happen, you know? And I think that's similar to how like with like the way that Fierda is and the way that the Shuhan is, that's like how it's gonna be. I want to spin off in Noivy Zim. That place seems lit. Whenever like the Zemini people show up with their fucking airships and they start dumping the Kareem anecdote on everyone, that shit was fire. I love that scene because I bet
really good.
they seem like comrades over there.
I feel like an Inej like spin-off where it follows her like fighting slavers. I think that would be cool. Or the Krug, I can never pronounce their name. Like the Shuhan created.
Oh, the Kierkegaard? I think it's Kierkegaard.
Yeah. Like a spin-off of like whatever the
I'd be happy with another Kaz focused novel. I mean, the ending line where it's like, tell Kaz Brecker the Queen of Ravka has a job for him. It's right there.
See,
what?
There could be. The band's getting back together.
Well, as much as the band can get back together. Because I don't think Mina would be there. I think, and then I don't think Inej would be there. I think it would be Kaz and Island. Or maybe it'd be Kaz and he gets a new crew together. All the like other dregs that are mentioned, like Roddy and the other one. There's like a girl.
Yeah. Regardless of what ends up happening, though, this is like a really good.
It's a great ending where even if she doesn't,
decides,
I would be sad.
I feel very like a lot of closure.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do like about this. Or it's like I'm satisfied with the ending, but because I love all of these characters so much and I love the world of the Grishaverse, I want more. You know, where it's just like. I want more only just because I'm so in love with the world, not because I feel like she said that she doesn't have any plans, but I know she's always writing things, and I'm sure she probably has like something written down. But Leigh Bardugo, if you die, whenever you die, release whatever you got. I don't care if it's unfinished. I don't care if it's your fucking grocery list, or it's like what Kaz would buy at the Ketterdam shops. I would read it, you know. And so with this, technically,
but that's okay.
Technically, I only have one more book in the Grishaverse to read, The Thorn of Woods or whatever, which is like all of like the short stories and stuff that like are supposed to be like more like world building stuff, but I don't know how it'll.
So do we anticipate a reading guide once you finish?
Once I finish reading that, I might. I don't know, I just don't feel like it's that complicated of a series. You know, you pretty much just straight through.
Yeah, that is like the nice thing. It's kind of straightforward.
Where unless you like, you could just read Six of Crows as its own duology, but I feel like you're missing out on so much more within this duology. I think it makes up for Shadow and Bone. The characterization, because it follows everyone from Shadow and Bone. Everyone you meet in Shadow and Bone, like at the end of it, except for like Alina and Mal, obviously, and even they get a little bit fan service. Yeah,
a little moment.
I think Leigh Bardugo did the right thing of like focusing on like her secondary character, and I think that's one thing that she probably learned while writing Shadow and Bone, that is that like her characters are so much stronger in that way, where like since Shadow and Bone is only focusing on like a story and Alina's perspective, it was probably harder, I think. Did you know too, I saw this like fun fact where apparently Nikolai was supposed to die in Ruin and Rising, but like because like she says that like whenever she writes Nikolai, it's like another person like takes over, she says, or it's like because of like the way how charismatic he is and how he acts, it's just like it's not even her writing, it's just like whatever goes on the page. And so he like basically, she says that he like talked her out of killing him. I think it's kind of so cute.
Stephanie Meyer coded.
But like I think it's kind of cute because it's just like I feel like Nikolai is like one of the most like of a character that's one of the most like I'd be like, oh, you know, because this like he has such a personality where like I feel like other characters, especially in like other novelizations and stuff like that, I don't think about them like I think about Nikolai. I think about Nikolai all the time. I love him. He's so funny. He's so quirky, and not in like cringy ways either. Like every line I read, I'm like, oh my god, he's so funny, ha ha ha. Like it's, you know what I'm saying?
But let me hold on. He said something.
What did he say?
Said something. And I was like, there's no way that Kristen can like uncritically support this. Let me scroll back a little bit.
Go ahead. What was it in? King of Scars or World of Wolves?
This something so, and I was like, what the fuck? It's not the last chapter, I don't think.
Is it in Wolves or King of Scars?
Yeah, it's Rule of Wolves. I wish I would have highlighted it. I hate myself so much. It was very cringe. Some of his lines are silly. So I was like, oh, if like BOOK-TOK got a hold of this, they would like.
It would what? They would not do nothing to my mans. That's my husband right there. I love him. He doesn't take himself. He doesn't take himself too seriously.
I know you think he's the perfect man.
He is a perfect man. You're telling me if this man showed up to your doorstep, you wouldn't be on your knees for him? I'd be on both of them, let me tell you. Like,
oh, I'm so mad.
Of the BOOK-TOK boyfriends, I think Nikolai is up there. He's sweet. He's genuine. He cares about women. He's not sexist. So what if he's a king? That's not his fault he was born into it. He wasn't even born into it either. He's a bastard.
True.
He don't have a drop of noble blood in his life. He's a true class traitor. He's the good kind of class traitor. He's like the Frederick Engels. Zoya's Karl Marx.
They're just saying things at this point. Fuck, I cannot remember. It was something so goofy because I was like, oh, if BOOK-TOK, like my whole mindset was like, well, if BOOK-TOK got a hold of this line, like this line would be like on all of the Hot Topic merch. And I can't remember what it was. It was so lame. And I just can't believe it was in this.
When was it? Was it in his perspective or Zoya's perspective? I can try to help you find it.
I just know it was his line. I need to go through like.
Was it before or after Zoya's coronation? For the war in Ketterdam? After Ketterdam? Before Ketterdam?
It was towards the end.
Was it before or after her coronation?
I think it was before the coronation.
Before the fight or after the fight?
I think
before they put the Darkling in the tree or after they put the Darkling in the whole thing? Was it after they got the, like...
Yeah, I don't remember. Ugh, I'll have to think about it and see if I can find it. It was something silly.
Was it, like, because I'm trying to think about whatever one-liner. Like after out of
I feel like it was when they were like talking by themselves in the office or like in that time when he was like seceding his crowd, but I could not tell you what it was.
Oh, hold on.
It was something goofy. He has some lines that are silly. Regardless.
He's a sweet boy.
I'll find it later. He is a sweet boy. I hope you cut out all the yawning. I'm doing so well though. I'm very proud of myself. Is there anything else that you can think of you wanted to cover in this?
That like whenever like it says, I read your list of proposed concessions. They're all absurd. I think they're intentionally so because you don't want people. Oh, why would we? Brum shot back. It's that he was done with the pomp as well. It wouldn't be unprecedented given the crushing defeat you suffered. He turned to Zoya. This is awkward. Did you know they lost?
It was something along those lines, but I don't know if it was that one or not.
That one? I'm the man who still wears the double eagle crown and the demon who just tore apart our battlefield. Let me know if you need your memory refreshed.
Maybe that was it. It was something goofy.
Oh, is it this? Where Nikolai knelt before her and reached for her hand. Stop doing that, she snapped. Stop kneeling. I can't. It's just what my knees do now. I noticed your tricky little turn of phase back there.
Oh my god, I just can't remember what it was. It's gonna drive me bonkers.
I don't know what it could be.
I don't know. It was something silly. It was one of those lines, and it was just like, what the fuck? Nikolai, come on,
I will gladly be your prince, your consort, your demon fool.
Kristen, I don't know. I don't remember.
I don't know. Is it supposed to be about him? Is it supposed to be about Zoya? Be talking a lot about Zoya.
I don't know. I don't remember. I just remember it was silly.
I don't know. I don't think anything he says is silly.
Because you're biased.
I'm not biased against Nikolai. I can critique him whenever he needs critiquing, but he doesn't need critiquing because he's a perfect man. I just read through that chapter. I didn't see nothing of cringiness or whatever-ness to try to...
I'm a liar and I'm a fake. I'm a pretender.
Just like Nikolai. Then stuff pretender. They call him. But he cares more about those people than that random dude. I don't even know anything about the guy. He's so pointless. He's just there to cause problems.
He was like the red herring.
Yeah.
Of the whole book.
Okay. I mean, overarching, anything you want to say about Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, King of Scars?
I think if you are somebody who thinks like Babel is maybe a little bit too daunting because it is
if
quite
they're
dense,
at this
would be
point,
really good.
If they're at this point in the podcast, I hope they would have already read this. If not, why are you
Fine, then
here?
cut that out.
I'm just saying,
Never
is there
mind.
anything like wrapping up, like overarching thoughts of the.
Bitch, I don't know. I don't think so. I think we covered most everything that we needed to. Clearly, we both had a lot to say, a lot of yapping.
Side yapper?
And it was just we both enjoyed it. I know, like, for my first read through, I thought it was really nice. And this is Kristen's second read through.
Still holds up. I finished this in February last year. It was early February. But I read these a lot more back to back. I was a little bit more spread out because I read like all of Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows in January, and then I read these because these two are both thick boys. They are a lot. One's like 600 pages, isn't it? Ow.
It's close to it, I think.
This one's 588.
We read a lot of really thick books this month.
Yeah, because I read this and then
it was a lot. It was a bit too much, in my opinion. But
a lot of fantasy.
I'm so afraid to start like BOOK-TOK fantasy because of how I've been done so dirty by BOOK-TOK romance.
Because we haven't read really. I mean, Six of Crows is a BOOK-TOK fantasy. Babel is BOOK-TOK, but also like
Avatar, Throne of Glass. But those were letdowns. Like Throne of Glass was like a huge letdown.
So very mid. All of it. I feel like all of SJM is mid.
Babel was
exceeded expectations.
I think it's an exception. I don't even think it follows the rules of BOOK-TOK recommendations.
I don't know. I mean, technically, I guess these two aren't BOOK-TOK, right? I mean, Six of Crows and like Shadow and Bone is like a book. I don't know. I think Legendborn is supposed to be goated, and that's another BOOK-TOK series. So Priori is Brandon Sanderson is BOOK-TOK boy. I've been going to Half Price Books, and all the Brandon Sanderson is gone every time. Like the only place that has it in stock is Barnes.
I have that extra copy of like Mistborn, like the tall version.
Yeah, I don't want the little one. I want the big ones. Thanks for listening to this episode of Literary Liberation. What are we reading next? Let me check.
I know we're doing some little books. So in March, we anticipate posting Ring Shout.
I don't know. That's not till April. That's not till April. Shut the fuck up.
Okay, so we're reading it in March, though.
Yes, but we're posting it in April
sometime.
Let me see.
Priory, I think.
Post the Scars. That's the 7th. And then we're posting. Oh, we're doing Bride again this month because this is going up in March. So Bride, Allie Hazelwood,
we're doing the Omegaverse,
which I heard it's not actually Omegaverse because it's just werewolves. They're still nodding.
So weird.
So
I'm so excited to see what that's all about. Like I'm adding it to my collection of like weird shit in my
mainstream though. I feel like this might be the most mainstream one. So next time we will be discussing Bride by Allie Hazelwood. So if you haven't read it yet or gotten it on your TBR, we've heard nothing but good things. But I need a lot to be pleased by a romance novel. I don't know. I read The Love Hypothesis. It was okay. It was like solid 3 stars, I think. I think I read it before I had Storygraph too. So maybe it would have been a 3.5 if I read it then. Because I don't think it was good enough for a 4, but
well, this will only be like your second or third monster romance. You don't read a lot of monster romance. Because
I read the Dragon Bride. That one was
the Dragon Bride.
I don't know what I rated that.
Sacrifice.
Which is
or the Demon's Bargain.
This is why you need to read this, bro. The serial killer one. It's like
I'll read it.
I think you'll actually like it. Not for me.
Just like the artwork of this is just so pretty.
It reminds me of like a Nora Roberts novel.
They're stunning. That's like my are they good? No. Did I enjoy them? Yes.
Speak for yourself, Mariah. I think I gave that bitch like 2 stars or something. I don't remember what I gave it.
Don't talk shit about Kate Robert. Home for you.
I gave it 2 stars on. I mean,
I hate Ice Planet Barbarians.
I probably will. I don't know. I like substance and I like slow burn, and that's one thing that I feel like I personally like reading a 300-page romance and like in the first 100 pages they're like already fucking. I'm like, what is this? Well, like the things that I rate high are like Anastasia, where like they don't fucking kiss until like 500 pages in. like, oh yes, finally. You know, like
Too much. I
no.
tapped out.
But I
I
mean,
read
like
300 pages of that shit, and I was like, fuck this, I'm out. I'm gonna go read my Blue Alien dick book.
that's because they have to be fucking within the first 50 pages for you to care.
No, I can read a slow burn.
Really?
I can't think of one.
I mean, this is probably the closest thing we have with the Grishaverse.
This one, though. This was a pretty slow burn.
Oh, I didn't know you bought
Considerably.
the physical copy.
Yeah, I bought this when I first started, like, my BOOK-TOK, like, thing, because I kept seeing
Oh,
it
really?
recommended. And I wanted,
And you
I'll
just
probably end
now
up
read it?
buying, I know.
Oh.
So this one's like 400 pages, and it took like a hot minute. It took like 200 pages.
200 pages.
Maybe even more.
I hope it's more, because if it's less, I don't want it. I think maybe it's because throughout middle school and high school I read a lot of fan fiction, and no fan fiction has them fucking anytime soon. They're all like slow burns. And so I just feel like it makes the payoff so much more worth it. Where like me reading like any romance, I feel like I never rate them higher than like a 4-star, because I'm like, I like something else going on, but also I like the tension, the longing, the yearning. I think that's
You know what was another slow burn? I thought of another one. It was Ruby Dixon's like Aspects and Anchors book. It was like 600 pages, and it took like 400 pages to get to a point. And I was very surprised by that.
Ruby
so there's
Dixon.
another one for you. Yeah, Ruby Dixon.
Surprisingly, if I can believe that. You probably felt like 400 pages, but it was like 150 instead of 50.
Wouldn't that be funny?
Like, what the fuck, bro? They're kissing. It's only 200 pages in. Like, I like it to be, and I think that's probably my issue too with like romantasy in general, is because like they, like, since it's only focused on the romance, it's like you have to have it resolved by the end of the first book, or like beginning at the end of the first book. While because this series is so political focused, like with even like Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows, like there's so much other stuff going on. None of their like true like relationshipy stuff happens until like the last book, you know?
Curious how this episode's gonna turn out, because we have like so much happening in the last like.
Thank you for listening. Check us out on our socials at Literary Liberation, Lit Podcast.
If you would
on Twitter.
like to enroll in our newsletter, it should be up and running. The sign up form in our
It'll be in the
link tree,
description.
which is,
It'll be in the description if you're on YouTube or Spotify. You don't have to go to like